My name's Kelly, and what I'm about to tell you happened during my nightly run through a park in Atlanta. It's something I still can't believe really happened. So, running at night was my thing. The park was pretty empty, and I loved the quiet. I'd put on my headphones, listen to some music, and just let go of the day's stress. But for the last few weeks, something had been off. I'd catch myself looking over my shoulder, sure that I wasn't alone. You know how it is. You convince yourself it's nothing, just your imagination. This one night, I was running my usual route. Everything seemed normal at first. The streetlights were dim, casting long shadows across the path. I jogged past this old oak tree I always see. That's when I noticed it, a flicker of movement just out of the corner of my eye. I stopped and pulled out my earbuds, straining to hear any noise. There was nothing, just the usual rustling of leaves in the breeze. Get a grip, Kelly, I muttered to myself. You're just being paranoid. I shook off the creepy feeling and kept running. But then, I heard it. A distinct sound of footsteps behind me. Not just an echo of mine, but someone else's steps, keeping pace with me. I glanced back quickly, but saw nothing. My heart started to race, not from the run, but from fear. I tried to tell myself it was just someone else jogging. But as I turned onto a less crowded path, the footsteps followed. Never too close, but always there. I picked up my pace, hoping to shake off whatever, or whoever it was. But the faster I ran, the faster the footsteps seemed to come. It felt like a game of cat and mouse, and I was definitely the mouse. You ever get that gut feeling that something's wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That's how I felt that night, and looking back, I should have trusted my instincts more. So there I was, running faster now, trying to shake off the footsteps behind me. I turned down a narrow path, hoping to lose whoever was following. The path was darker here, the streetlights more spread out, casting long, eerie shadows on the ground. Every rustle of leaves made me jump. Every creak of the trees sounded like a warning. As I ran past a bench, I noticed a guy sitting there, just staring straight ahead. His eyes didn't follow me, didn't even blink. It was like he was in a trance. Creepy, right? I wanted to ask if he'd seen anyone else, but something about him gave me the chills. I decided it was best to keep moving. Just keep running, Kelly, I whispered to myself. You're almost home. But the footsteps didn't stop. They seemed to echo louder, bouncing off the trees and mixing with the wind. I glanced back again, hoping to catch a glimpse of my pursuer, but all I saw were shifting shadows. My heart pounded harder, not just from the exertion, but from pure, raw fear. Suddenly, the surrounding air grew colder, like I'd stepped into a freezer. My breath came out in frosty puffs, and goosebumps prickled my skin. It didn't make sense. It was a warm night. The cold was unnatural, like it was warning me to turn back. Then I saw it. The old, abandoned playground up ahead, half hidden by overgrown bushes. Normally, I'd never go near it. Everyone knew it was haunted, just a local legend to scare kids. But tonight, it seemed like my only option. Maybe I could hide there, wait for the footsteps to pass. It was risky, but I didn't see any other choice. With a deep breath, I veered off the path and headed straight for the playground. The swings moved slightly, creaking in the wind, and the merry-go-round spun slowly, as if an invisible hand pushed it. I ducked behind a large slide, trying to calm my breathing in. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped. I held my breath, listening intently. A low, whispering sound reached my ears, almost like someone muttering under their breath, but the words were too faint, too jumbled to understand. I peeked around the slide, but saw no one. The park was empty, or so it seemed. Hello? I called out, my voice shaky. Is anyone there? Silence. Then, just as I started to think maybe I was imagining things, I heard a reply, soft and chilling. Kelly. It was barely a whisper, but it was enough to send a shiver down my spine. How did they know my name? I pressed myself tighter against the slide, trying to stay hidden. Whoever it was, They were close, and they knew who I was. I needed to get out of there fast. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs felt like lead. I couldn't move, couldn't think. The only thing I could do was wait, hope, and pray that I wasn't about to become another one of the park's ghost stories. You know how stress can bring out sides of you that you didn't even know existed. Well, that night I found out a lot about myself that I never wanted to know. So there I was, hiding behind the slide with whoever or whatever was whispering my name, getting closer. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I fumbled it out, my hands shaking. It was a text from my friend Lisa. "Hey, where are you? Thought we were meeting up tonight." I had totally forgotten. Lisa and I were supposed to grab a late coffee after my run. I quickly texted back. "In the park. Something's wrong. I think someone's following me." Almost immediately, my phone rang. I answered in a whisper. "Lisa, I'm scared. I don't know what's happening." "Kelly, where exactly are you?" Her voice was steady, trying to keep me calm. "Stay where you are. I'm coming to get you." I told her about the old playground and hung up, my heart pounding even harder. Lisa was my best friend, always the brave one, always knew what to do. But this time, I wasn't sure even she could help. The minutes felt like hours. I stayed crouched behind the slide, trying to stay invisible. The whispers had stopped, but the cold, uneasy feeling lingered. Every creak and rustle seemed magnified, and I kept expecting something to jump out at me. Finally, I saw Lisa's flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Relief washed over me as she called out, "Kelly, where are you?" I jumped up and ran to her, nearly collapsing into her arms. Lisa, it was horrible. I kept hearing footsteps and whispers. They knew my name. She held me tight, looking around warily. "Let's get out of here. We'll talk once we're safe." We started back towards the main path, her flashlight guiding the way. But then we heard it. The footsteps, slow and deliberate, matching our pace. Lisa turned, shining her light into the darkness, but there was no one there. "Whoever you are, leave us alone," she shouted, her voice echoing through the trees. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment, everything was silent. Then the whisper came again, louder this time. "Kelly, you can't escape." Lisa grabbed my hand, pulling me faster. "We're almost out of here. Just keep moving." We finally reached the edge of the park, the streetlights and the sound of distant traffic a welcome relief. But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched, that those unseen eyes were still following us. Back at my apartment, Lisa and I sat on the couch, the adrenaline still pumping through our veins. She looked at me, her eyes serious. "Kelly, what the hell is going on? This isn't just some random creep. This is something else." I nodded, my mind racing. "I don't know, Lisa, but whatever it is, it's not going to stop." She squeezed my hand, determination in her eyes. "We'll figure it out, together. You're not alone in this." That night, we barely slept, jumping at every noise, every shadow. Lisa stayed with me, refusing to leave me alone. It was the first time I'd ever felt truly vulnerable, and it scared me to my core. But having Lisa there, facing this unknown horror together, gave me a glimmer of hope. We didn't have answers yet, but we had each other. And sometimes, that's all you need to keep going. Ever had a night where you just couldn't sleep, no matter how hard you tried? That was me, the night after the park incident. Every creak, every whisper of wind outside my window made me jump. Lisa stayed by my side, determined to keep me safe. We were both on edge, but we tried to keep things normal, talking about random stuff to distract ourselves. Morning finally came, and with it a false sense of security. Daylight made everything seem less terrifying, but deep down, I knew the danger wasn't gone. Over breakfast, Lisa and I tried to piece together what had happened. "So, you're saying you heard whispers and saw shadows, but nothing concrete?" she asked, her brow furrowed in thought. "Yeah," I replied, stirring my coffee absent-mindedly. But it wasn't just that. It felt like I don't know, like something was targeting me. And then it knew my name. Lisa nodded slowly. We need to go back, Kelly. In the daylight. Maybe we missed something. The thought of returning to the park made my skin crawl. But I knew she was right. We had to understand what was happening if we were going to stop it. So we decided to go back that afternoon, hoping to find some clues. The park looked so different in the daylight. The shadows that had seemed so menacing the night before were just ordinary trees and bushes. We walked the path, retracing my steps. As we neared the old playground, my heart rate picked up. "This is it," I said, pointing to the rusted swings. "This is where I hid." Lisa scanned the area, her eyes sharp. "Okay, let's look around. Maybe there's something here that can explain what's going on." We split up, checking the bushes, the ground, even the playground equipment. I was about to give up when I noticed something carved into the base of the slide. It was a symbol, crude and ancient looking, like something out of a horror movie. "Lisa, come here," I called, my voice shaking. She rushed over, and I pointed to the symbol. "Do you think this has anything to do with it?" Her face went pale. "I've seen this before. It's some kind of occult symbol. My grandmother used to tell stories about things like this, rituals and curses." A cold chill ran down my spine. "You're kidding, right?" "I wish I was," she said, her voice low. "This could be serious, Kelly. We need to figure out who did this and why." Just then, a movement caught my eye. In the distance, a figure stood watching us. I couldn't make out their face, but I knew it was the same person, or thing, that had followed me. "Lisa, we need to go." "Now," I said, grabbing her arm. We backed away, keeping our eyes on the figure. But it didn't move. It just stood there, like it was waiting. Once we were out of the park, we ran all the way back to my apartment, not daring to look back. That night, the whispers returned, louder and more insistent. Lisa and I huddled together, trying to block them out. The tension was unbearable. But we had moments of quiet too, talking about anything to keep our minds off the fear. "Remember that time we got lost on our road trip and ended up at that weird diner?" Lisa asked, trying to lighten the mood. I laughed weakly. "Yeah, and the waitress told us those ghost stories. We were so freaked out we couldn't even eat." Those memories helped, but they were fleeting. The reality of our situation kept crashing down on us. We knew we couldn't keep running. We had to face whatever was haunting us, and soon. As the whispers grew louder, I knew we were running out of time. The park, the symbol, the figure. They were all pieces of a puzzle we had to solve. And somehow, we had to survive long enough to put it all together. Have you ever tried to solve a puzzle, only to realize you were looking at it all wrong? That's how we felt, trying to figure out the mystery behind the whispers and the shadowy figure. It was like every clue led us in circles, making us question everything we thought we knew. Lisa and I decided to dig deeper into the history of the park. We spent hours at the library, sifting through old newspapers and records sewn. It was tedious, but we were determined. After a while, we found something that seemed promising. An article about a series of disappearances in the park back in the 1970s. The victims were mostly young women, and their bodies were never found. The case was never solved. "Look at this," Lisa said, pointing to a grainy black and white photo of a missing person. "Do you think it's connected?" "Maybe," I replied, feeling a mix of hope and dread. "But it still doesn't explain the whispers or the symbol." That evening, we met up with a local historian who specialized in urban legends and occult practices. His name was Mr. Stevens, and he had a reputation for being a bit eccentric. But we were desperate for answers. "So, you say you found an occult symbol at the playground?" Mr. Stevens asked, adjusting his glasses. "Describe it to me." I sketched the symbol on a napkin, and his eyes widened. "Ah, that's interesting. This symbol is associated with an old ritual meant to bind restless spirits." Lisa and I exchanged a glance. "Restless spirits?" I echoed. "You mean ghosts?" "Not exactly," Mr. Stevens said, leaning in. more like echoes of those who died violently or with unfinished business. The symbol is meant to keep them trapped, but if it's not done correctly, it can attract them instead. So, someone messed up the ritual? Lisa asked. Possibly, he said. Or it was done on purpose. Either way, it's bad news for you. Just when we thought we had a lead, something else came up. A friend of Lisa's, who worked as a journalist, called her with some information. He said he had seen someone hanging around the park at night, someone who didn't seem quite right. He described the figure exactly like you did, Lisa told me, her voice tense. He thinks it's some kind of stalker, maybe a copycat trying to recreate the old crimes. Great, I muttered. So now we have ghosts and a potential psycho to worry about. The journalist gave us a name, Daniel Roberts, a local man with a history of mental illness. He had been in and out of institutions for years and was known for his obsession with the occult. It seemed like a solid lead, so we decided to track him down. We found Daniel living in a run-down apartment on the edge of town. He looked disheveled and nervous, but when we mentioned the park, his eyes lit up with an eerie excitement. You've seen them too, haven't you? He whispered. The shadows, the whispers, they're real. They're always watching. Daniel, did you do the ritual in the park? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded vigorously. I did it to communicate with them, to understand their pain, but I made a mistake. Now they're angry. Lisa and I left his apartment more confused than ever. We had two theories, one involving a botched ritual and restless spirits, and the other involving a disturbed man possibly recreating old crimes. We were no closer to the truth, and every step we took seemed to uncover more questions than answers. That night, the whispers were back, louder and more insistent. I could feel their presence, like icy fingers brushing against my skin. In the middle of the night, Lisa woke me up, her face pale. Kelly, I think we're being played. What if Daniel is just a pawn and there's something or someone else behind all this? Her words sent a chill down my spine. We had been so focused on finding logical explanations that we hadn't considered the possibility of something even more sinister lurking in the shadows. We were running out of time, and the lines between reality and horror were starting to blur. The park, the symbol, the whispers, none of it made sense, and yet it all felt connected. We needed to get to the heart of it, before it was too late. Have you ever faced your deepest fear, only to find it staring back at you with a grin? That's where Lisa and I ended up, at the heart of the horror, where reality twisted into something unrecognizable. After our unsettling encounter with Daniel, we knew we had to return to the park one last time. We needed to confront whatever was haunting us, and put an end to it. Our nerves were shot, but we were determined. We couldn't keep living in fear. As we entered the park, the familiar shadows seemed to close in around us. The sun was setting, and the eerie twilight cast everything in a sinister light. We headed straight for the old playground, the place where it all began. The symbol was still there, carved into the slide, mocking us. This is it, Lisa said, her voice trembling but firm. We need to finish what was started. We need to fix the ritual. We had brought supplies based on Mr. Stevens' advice. Candles, salt, and a printed version of the correct ritual. My hands shook as we set everything up, the weight of what we were about to do pressing down on me. Are you sure this will work? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Lisa met my eyes, her resolve clear. It has to. We don't have any other choice. We began the ritual, chanting the words, lighting the candles, and spreading the salt in a protective circle. The air grew colder, and the whispers started again, swirling around us like a malevolent wind. Kelly, Lisa. Their voices were clearer now, filled with anger and sorrow. My heart pounded in my chest, but I forced myself to keep going. We were almost done when the ground beneath us started to tremble, and a dark figure emerged from the shadows. It was the same figure I had seen that night, but now it was closer, its features more defined. It wasn't just a man. It was a grotesque blend of human and something else entirely. Its eyes were hollow, its mouth twisted into a ghastly grin. "You shouldn't have come back," it hissed, its voice a chilling echo. Lisa and I clung to each other, our fear palpable. But we had come too far to back down now. I grabbed the last of the salt and threw it at the figure, chanting the final words of the ritual. The figure recoiled, letting out a blood-curdling scream as it started to dissolve into the air. For a moment, everything was silent. The whispers stopped, and the cold dissipated. We had done it, or so we thought. Just as we started to relax, a new sound filled the air. A soft, mocking laughter. The playground seemed to warp, the shadows lengthening and twisting into grotesque shapes. "You think it's over?" The voice echoed around us, though the figure was gone. "This is just the beginning. You've opened the door." Lisa's grip on my hand tightened. "What does that mean? What did we do?" My mind raced, the implications dawning on me. We had completed the ritual, but in doing so, we had unleashed something far worse. The whispers weren't gone. They had simply been set free, no longer bound to the park. As we stumbled out of the playground, I felt a presence following us. It wasn't the same as before. It was stronger, more insidious. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. We hadn't ended the horror. We had spread it. Lisa and I returned to my apartment, our minds reeling. We tried to process what had happened, but there were no easy answers. The whispers returned that night, not from the park, but from within our own minds, taunting us with our failure. "Kelly, you can't escape." We had faced our fears, but in doing so, we had unlocked something far more terrifying. The psychological toll was immense. I found myself questioning everything. My sanity, my actions, my very existence. Lisa wasn't much better, her brave facade crumbling as the days went by. In the end, we were left with more questions than answers, and the chilling realization that the horror wasn't confined to the park. It was with us, always watching, always waiting. The true terror wasn't in the shadows, it was in knowing that we had become part of a larger, darker narrative. And as I sit here, telling you this story, I can still hear the whispers. They're inside my head, reminding me that some doors once opened can never be closed. The real question now is, how do we live with what we've unleashed? Kelly, it's not over. The voice is clear, persistent, and deep down, I know it's right. The horror has only just begun.